The stars looked different from the bridge of the Endeavor. Captain Daniel Hayes stood at the main viewing window and watched as the alien planet grew larger on the screen. He had been in space for 12 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Humanity was about to meet the Viridian Empire for the first time. Daniel was 35 years old, tall and lean with dark hair that was starting to show gray at the temples. He had steady brown eyes that missed nothing. Behind him, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Everyone knew what was at stake. This meeting could change everything for humanity. The communications officer, a woman named Katie Sullivan, turned in her chair. "Captain, we're receiving a message from the Viridian homeworld. They're clearing us for landing at their capital city." "Good," Daniel said. "Take us in slowly. I don't want to spook them. Just..." The Endeavor descended through thick clouds toward the surface of Hive Prime. When they broke through, Daniel saw a city unlike anything humans had ever built. Massive structures rose from the ground like crystals, each one glowing with soft blue light. The buildings seemed to be grown rather than constructed, their surfaces smooth and organic. Daniel walked to the transport bay where his team was waiting. Dr. Lisa Chen stood beside a pile of equipment cases, checking items off a list on her tablet. She was a language expert, one of the best humanity had. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her sharp eyes studied everything with intense focus. "Ready?" Daniel asked her. "As ready as I'll ever be," Lisa replied. "Their language is incredibly complex. Part sound, part chemical signals. I've been studying their transmissions for months, but actually speaking with them will be different." Ben Carter was sitting on one of the cases, looking relaxed despite the situation. He was the team's alien biology expert, a tall man with sandy hair and an easy smile. "I just hope they don't find us too ugly," he joked. Daniel smiled. "I'm sure they're thinking the same thing about us." The transport ship took them down to the landing platform. When the doors opened, Daniel got his first look at a Viridian. The alien stood 7 feet tall, its body covered in a hard shell that shimmered with colors that seemed to shift in the light. It had 6 legs and 4 arms, each ending in delicate manipulators. Its head was narrow with large compound eyes that reflected everything around it. The Viridian made a series of clicking sounds and released a scent that made Daniel's nose twitch. Lisa quickly checked her translation device. "It says welcome to Hive Prime. It is Chancellor Kethrix, and it will guide us to the royal palace." Daniel bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "Thank you, Chancellor. We are honored to be here." The Chancellor led them through the city. Everywhere Daniel looked, he saw more Viridians going about their business. They moved with precise efficiency, never bumping into each other despite the crowds. The buildings towered overhead, and Daniel realized that many of them were connected by bridges and tunnels. The royal palace was the largest structure in the city. It looked ancient, its walls covered in symbols that glowed with inner light. Guards stood at every entrance, their shells darker and thicker than the other Viridians Daniel had seen. Inside, the palace was a maze of corridors. The walls seemed to pulse with life, and the air was thick with chemical scents. Lisa kept her translation device active, trying to make sense of the pheromone messages that filled the air. They were brought to a large chamber where dozens of Viridians waited. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat Queen Thesara. She was massive, nearly twice the size of the other Viridians. Her shell was a deep purple that seemed to absorb light, and she wore elaborate decorations that marked her status. Her eyes fixed on Daniel with an intensity that made him feel like an insect under a microscope. The Queen spoke, and her voice was like wind through metal pipes. Lisa's device translated. "Humans, you are young and small. Your empire spans only one star system. Why should the Viridian Empire acknowledge you?" Daniel stepped forward. He knew he had to be careful. "Your Majesty, we come not to demand recognition but to learn. Humanity may be young, but we are eager to understand our place in the galaxy. We offer friendship and knowledge." The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then she made a gesture with one of her arms. "We shall see. You will stay as our guests. You will learn our ways. Perhaps we will find you useful." Over the following days, Daniel and his team were given a tour of the city. They were shown factories where Viridians created technology far beyond human understanding. They visited schools where young Viridians learned to communicate through scent and sound. They saw gardens where strange plants grew in geometric patterns. But everywhere they went, Daniel noticed something odd. The Viridians seemed nervous. They would stop talking when the humans approached. They would exchange glances that Daniel couldn't read. Something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. One evening, Daniel was walking through the palace gardens when he overheard two Viridians speaking in low clicks. He stayed hidden behind a large plant and activated his recording device. Lisa could translate it later. The next morning, Lisa came to his room with a worried expression. "Daniel, you need to hear this. The Viridians were talking about something called the Forbidden Chamber. It's somewhere deep in the palace. They said no outsider has ever seen it. They said if anyone tries to enter, they will be killed." "Why would they have a forbidden chamber?" Daniel asked. "I don't know," Lisa said. But they sounded afraid. Really afraid. That evening, there was a formal dinner in the Great Hall. Daniel sat at a table with Ben and Lisa, while Viridians brought them food that had been specially prepared for human digestion. Daniel watched Queen Thesara at the high table. She seemed distracted, her attention often drifting away from the festivities. Daniel decided to take a risk. When there was a pause in the conversation, he spoke loud enough for many to hear. "Your Majesty, we have heard whispers of a sacred chamber within your palace. We would be honored to learn more about your most important traditions." The entire hall went silent. Every Viridian turned to look at Daniel. The temperature seemed to drop. Chancellor Kethrix stood up, his shell darkening with what Daniel guessed was anger. "Human," the Chancellor said, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You speak of things you should not. The Queen's chamber is forbidden. It is sacred beyond your understanding. No outsider may ever enter. To do so is death. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand, Chancellor. I meant no offense." But as the dinner continued and conversation slowly resumed, Daniel caught the Queen looking at him. For just a moment, he thought he saw something in her alien eyes. Was it fear? Or was it hope? Later that night, lying in his quarters, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the Forbidden Chamber and the way the Viridians reacted when he mentioned it. They weren't just protecting a secret. They were terrified of something. He made a decision. He would find out what was in that chamber, no matter what it took. Something told him that the future of both species might depend on it. 3 weeks passed on Hive Prime, and Daniel spent every moment learning. He attended diplomatic meetings where trade agreements were discussed. He toured scientific facilities where Viridian researchers worked on projects that made his head spin. He learned basic words in their complex language, though he would never master the chemical communication that was so natural to them. But he also watched and listened. He paid attention to things others might miss. He noticed how the palace guards changed shifts every 6 hours, with military precision. He saw how certain corridors were always empty, as if the Viridians avoided them. He marked the places where his escorts suddenly became tense and hurried him along. Daniel befriended a young Viridian named Xylith. The alien was a scholar who studied ancient history. Unlike most Viridians, Xylith seemed curious about humans, rather than dismissive. They would meet in the palace library, a vast room filled with crystalline data storage that glowed in rainbow colors. One day, while they were alone, Xylith said something unexpected. "Your species is very different from us, Daniel Hayes." "I suppose we are," Daniel agreed, looking up from a tablet that displayed Viridian historical texts. "You are emotional, impulsive. You act on feelings rather than logic." Xylith's tone was not critical, just observational. This is considered a weakness among my people. Maybe, Daniel said. But it's also our strength. Emotion drives us to do things that pure logic might say are impossible. Xylith was quiet for a moment. Then the alien leaned closer and lowered his voice to barely a whisper. Daniel Hayes, I must tell you something, but you must never reveal where you heard it. My life would end. Daniel felt his heart rate increase. I promise. The Queen is not well. She has not been well for many cycles. Our people are fading. We hide it from the galaxy, but we are dying slowly. Before Daniel could ask more, another Viridian entered the library. Xylith immediately returned to normal conversation about ancient wars and forgotten empires. But Daniel's mind was racing. What did Xylith mean by fading? Were the Viridians sick? That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He went to Ben's quarters and found the biologist still awake, studying data on his computer screens. Ben, I need you to do something for me, Daniel said. Can you run detailed biological scans on the Viridians? Without them knowing? Ben looked up, surprised. That's not really ethical, Daniel. And if they catch us, it could destroy the whole diplomatic mission. I know. But I think something is seriously wrong here. I think they're in trouble. And too proud to ask for help. Ben studied Daniel's face for a long moment. Then he sighed. All right. But this better be important. Over the next week, Ben discreetly collected data. He analyzed the air composition in rooms where Viridians gathered. He studied biological residue left on surfaces. He compared his findings against the Viridian genetic information that had been shared during the cultural exchange. When he came to Daniel's quarters 7 days later, his face was pale. You were right, Daniel. This is bad. Really bad. Lisa was there too, and they all sat down as Ben pulled up charts and graphs on his tablet. The Viridians are experiencing species-wide genetic degradation. Their DNA is literally falling apart. Their immune systems are failing. Their birth rate has dropped by 70% over the last century. How is that possible? Lisa asked, shocked. I think they did it to themselves, Ben said. From what I can tell, they've been genetically modifying their species for thousands of years, making themselves smarter, stronger, longer-lived. But somewhere along the way, they lost something crucial, some kind of genetic resilience that keeps DNA stable. Can it be fixed? Daniel asked. I don't know. Maybe. But they would need to admit they have a problem first, and I don't think Viridian pride will allow that. Lisa had been working on her own project. She had been translating ancient Viridian texts that were stored in the palace archives. Most were boring historical records, but she had found something interesting. I found references to something called the Sacred Metamorphosis, she said, pulling up her notes. According to these old texts, every Viridian queen goes through a transformation every 50 years. It's supposed to renew her body and somehow strengthen the entire species. How does that work? Ben asked. The texts aren't clear. They talk about it in religious terms. Divine rebirth. Sacred renewal. But it all happens in the Forbidden Chamber. That's where the transformation occurs. Daniel stood up and paced the small room. So, the queen is supposed to transform, and that somehow helps the whole species. But if she hasn't transformed, or if something went wrong, then the genetic degradation makes sense. Ben finished. Whatever happens in that chamber, it's not just ceremonial. It's biological. It's necessary for their survival. We need more information, Daniel said. Lisa, can you find more texts about this metamorphosis? I'll try, but the detailed information seems to be restricted. Daniel made a decision. Then we need to get into that chamber. Are you insane? Ben said. They said anyone who enters will be killed. If we don't, the entire Viridian species might die out. Do you understand what that means? An entire civilization, thousands of years old, gone. We can't let that happen. Lisa shook her head. Daniel, even if you're right, even if they need help, they have to ask for it. We can't just force our way into their most sacred place, can't we? Daniel said. What if they're too proud to ask? What if they would rather die than admit weakness to a species they consider primitive? We have a moral obligation to help, if we can. The next day, Daniel requested a private meeting with Queen Thesara. He was surprised when the request was granted. He was brought to a small chamber, where the queen waited alone, without guards or advisors. You wish to speak with me, human? Her voice was tired. Daniel chose his words carefully. Your Majesty, I believe your people are in danger. I believe you are in danger, and I think you know it. The queen's massive form shifted. You presume much. I presume nothing. I observe, I learn, and I want to help. Help? The queen made a sound that might have been laughter. What can a species that has barely left its own planet do to help an empire that spans 12 star systems? I don't know yet, Daniel admitted. But I know that sometimes an outsider can see solutions that those too close to a problem cannot. Let me help you. Tell me about the chamber. For a long moment, the queen was silent. Then she spoke. Her voice barely a whisper. Leave this place, Daniel Hayes. Leave Hive Prime. Take your people and go back to your small blue world. Forget what you have learned here. I can't do that. Then you are a fool. The queen stood, towering over him. And fools do not live long. Daniel was escorted back to his quarters. But he had seen something in the queen's eyes. Behind the anger, behind the pride, there was desperation. She knew her species was dying, and she didn't know how to stop it. That night, Daniel began planning. He studied the palace layout that had been provided to the human delegation. He memorized guard rotations. He found building plans in the historical archives that showed how the palace had been constructed centuries ago. Ben and Lisa tried to talk him out of it, but they eventually realized he was determined. So instead of arguing, they decided to help. If you're going to do this stupid thing, Lisa said, at least do it smart. I can create a pheromone mask. It won't fool them for long, but it might keep them from detecting you immediately. And I'll put together a medical kit, Ben added. If the queen really is sick, you might need it. Daniel looked at his friends and felt grateful. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Ben said. This is probably going to get us all killed. The Festival of Unity came once every lunar cycle. It was a celebration where all Viridians gathered in the main plaza to honor their queen and their empire. The palace would be nearly empty except for a skeleton crew of guards, and their attention would be focused outward on the crowds, not inward on the empty halls. Daniel had been preparing for 3 days. He studied every detail, ran through the plan 100 times in his mind. Lisa had created a chemical mixture that would mask his human scent. It wouldn't last long, maybe 30 minutes, but it might be enough. Ben had assembled a compact medical kit with everything he thought might be needed, though he admitted he was guessing about Viridian biology. The night of the festival arrived. Daniel stood in his quarters, dressed in dark clothes that would blend with the shadows. He checked his equipment one last time. Scanning device, medical kit, recording device, translation unit, a small plasma cutter in case he needed to get through locked doors. Lisa and Ben came to see him off. Lisa handed him a small vial. Spray this on yourself. It will mimic Viridian pheromones. But Daniel, if you're caught, we can't help you. The diplomatic consequences would be enormous. I know, Daniel said. If this goes wrong, tell everyone I acted alone. Tell them you tried to stop me, like they'll believe that, Ben muttered. But he gripped Daniel's hand firmly. Good luck. Daniel waited until the festival was at its peak. Through his window, he could see the plaza filled with thousands of Viridians, their shells glowing in coordinated patterns. He could hear the strange music they made, a combination of clicks and vibrations that resonated through the buildings. He slipped out of his quarters and into the service corridors. These passages were used by maintenance workers and were rarely monitored. His heart pounded as he made his way deeper into the palace. Every shadow seemed like a guard. Every sound made him freeze. The old building plans had shown him a route that avoided most of the main hallways. He crawled through maintenance shafts that were too small for Viridians, but just big enough for a human. He squeezed through gaps between walls, where cooling systems ran. He climbed down access ladders into the lower levels of the palace. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes, Daniel reached the level where the forbidden chamber was supposed to be. The corridors here were different from the rest of the palace. The walls were covered in ancient symbols that glowed with a soft light. The air was warmer and thick, with scents he couldn't identify. He moved slowly, using a scanner to detect any Viridians ahead. The device showed 2 guards stationed at the end of the corridor. Daniel waited, watching their pattern. Every 15 minutes, they would move to opposite ends of the corridor to check side passages, leaving the center unguarded for exactly 90 seconds. When the next patrol cycle began, Daniel moved. He sprinted silently down the corridor during those 90 seconds and pressed himself against the wall beside a large door. This had to be it. The door was massive, made of the same organic material as the rest of the palace, but covered in symbols that seemed to move and shift in the light. The guards returned to their positions. Daniel held his breath, hoping the pheromone mask was working. The guards stood just meters away, but they didn't react to his presence. Minutes passed. Daniel's legs began to cramp from standing so still, but he didn't dare move. Finally, the guards began another patrol cycle. Daniel had 90 seconds. He examined the door quickly. There was no visible lock, no control panel. The symbols on the door glowed brighter as he approached. He reached out slowly and touched the surface. The door responded immediately. It slid open with a soft sound like a sigh. Daniel didn't have time to wonder why it wasn't locked. He slipped inside, and the door closed behind him. The chamber was enormous and dimly lit by bioluminescent growths on the walls. The air was hot and humid, almost like being inside something alive. As Daniel's eyes adjusted, he saw it. In the center of the chamber was a structure that looked like a massive cocoon, easily 3 meters tall. It pulsed with light from within, and he could hear a sound like a slow heartbeat. Daniel approached carefully. As he got closer, he could see something moving inside the cocoon. The outer membrane was translucent, and he could make out a shape within. It was the queen, but not as he had seen her before. Her body was in a state of transformation, caught between 2 forms. Parts of her shell had dissolved, revealing raw flesh beneath. Her limbs were twisted at strange angles. She looked like she was in agony. A voice spoke, weak but angry. "Who dares enter this sacred place?" Daniel jumped. The queen's compound eyes were open, staring at him through the membrane of the cocoon. He could see pain and fury in that alien gaze. "Your Majesty, my name is Daniel Hayes. I came to help you." "Help?" The queen's voice was bitter. "You have doomed yourself, human. The guards will kill you for this violation." "Maybe," Daniel said, moving closer. "But not before I figure out what's wrong and how to fix it. You cannot fix this. No one can. This is the price of our pride." Daniel activated his medical scanner and began taking readings. The device was designed for human biology, but Ben had modified it to detect basic life signs in other species. The readings were alarming. The queen's vital signs were weak and growing weaker. "Tell me what's supposed to happen here," Daniel said, not looking up from his scanner. "Tell me about the metamorphosis." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then, perhaps because she was dying anyway, perhaps because she had kept the secret for too long, she began to speak. "Every 50 years, a Viridian queen must undergo metamorphosis. Our bodies transform, renewing themselves at the cellular level. This renewal somehow spreads to our entire species. It is how we maintain genetic stability. It is how we survive. But this time it didn't work. Daniel said, understanding dawning. No. The transformation began, but it cannot complete. I am trapped between forms. I have been here for 6 weeks, slowly dying. When I die, my species will follow within a generation. Our genetic structure will collapse completely. Why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you tell us? Pride. The word came out like a curse. We are the mighty Viridian Empire. We do not admit weakness to species we consider inferior. Better to die than to beg. Daniel felt anger rising. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. My species learned a long time ago that asking for help isn't weakness, it's survival. He pulled out his communication device and called Ben. Get down here. Bring all your equipment. I'm sending you my location. And, are you in the chamber? Ben's voice was shocked. Yes. And the Queen is dying. If we don't help her, an entire species dies with her. Daniel, the guards. I don't care about the guards. Just get here. The Queen made a sound that might have been laughter. Bold words from one so small. But what can you possibly do? My own scientists could not solve this. What makes you think a human can succeed where Viridians have failed? Daniel looked at her through the translucent membrane. Because sometimes you need fresh eyes. Because sometimes the answer is something you overlooked because it seemed too simple. And because I'm not going to give up just because something is hard. He heard sounds outside the chamber. Footsteps. Many of them. The guards had discovered someone was inside. Voices shouted in the Viridian language. Angry and alarmed. The door began to open. Daniel stood his ground, placing himself between the door and the Queen's cocoon. If they were going to kill him, they would have to do it while he was trying to save their ruler. 6 guards burst into the chamber, their shells dark with aggression. They saw Daniel and raised their weapons, but, before they could fire, the Queen's voice rang out, stronger than Daniel had heard it in the last few minutes. Stop. Do not harm the human. He is here at my command. The guards froze, confused. One of them spoke. Your Majesty, this human has violated the most sacred law. He must be executed. He is trying to save my life, the Queen said. Something none of you could do. You will let him work, or you will face my displeasure. The guards lowered their weapons but didn't leave. They stood at the edges of the chamber, watching with hostile eyes as Daniel continued his scans. Ben arrived 10 minutes later, escorted by more guards. He looked terrified, but determined. Lisa was with him, carrying her translation equipment. They rushed to Daniel's side. Ben set up his equipment quickly, his hands shaking slightly as he worked. Lisa positioned herself near the Queen's cocoon, using her translation device to communicate more clearly. Daniel watched as Ben's scanners analyzed the Queen's biological state in detail. The minutes stretched into an hour. The guards remained motionless around the chamber's edges. More Viridians arrived, including Chancellor Kethrix, who looked like he wanted to kill Daniel with his bear manipulators. But the Queen had given her command, and no one dared disobey. Finally, Ben looked up from his equipment. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright with discovery. I think I found it. Everyone in the chamber leaned forward. Daniel moved to Ben's side. What did you find? Ben pulled up a holographic display showing complex genetic structures. The Queen's transformation requires a specific enzyme to catalyze the cellular regeneration. It's like a key that unlocks the metamorphosis process. Without it, her body started the transformation but can't complete it. Where is this enzyme supposed to come from? Daniel asked. That's the problem. The Viridians used to produce it naturally, but they don't anymore. Look at these genetic markers. Ben pointed to sections of the hologram that were highlighted in red. Thousands of years of genetic modification removed the genes responsible for producing this enzyme. Your people were engineering yourselves to be smarter and live longer, but you accidentally deleted something crucial. Chancellor Kethrix spoke, his voice cold. If what you say is true, then there is no solution. We cannot produce What we no longer possess, the ability to create. Maybe you can't, Ben said slowly. But humans can. The chamber went silent. Every Viridian eye fixed on Ben. What do you mean? The Queen asked from within her cocoon. Ben's hands moved across his holographic display, bringing up human genetic data alongside the Viridian information. Humans still have this enzyme. We produce it naturally as part of our immune system and healing response. It's one of the reasons humans heal from injuries relatively quickly. Our bodies are constantly regenerating cells, fighting off damage, adapting to threats. You're saying a human enzyme could work with Viridian biology? Lisa asked, skeptical. I'm saying it might. The basic cellular structure is similar enough. Obviously, there would be risks. But the alternative is certain death. Unquote. Daniel stepped forward. How would we do it? How would we transfer the enzyme? Ben looked uncomfortable. We would need a fresh sample of human biological material. Blood, tissue, something that contains active cells producing the enzyme. Then we would have to introduce it directly into the transformation matrix. Take mine, Daniel said immediately. Daniel, no, Lisa protested. We don't know what this will do to you. The procedure could kill you. If I don't do it, the Queen dies. Then the Viridians die. Then any chance of friendship between our species dies. Daniel looked around the chamber, at all the alien faces watching him. Besides, this is what humans do. We help, even when it's dangerous, even when it seems impossible. The Queen spoke from within her cocoon, her voice strange and distant. Why would you do this? My people have treated yours with disdain. We called you primitive. We mocked your small empire. Why would you sacrifice yourself for us? Daniel walked closer to the cocoon until he was standing right beside it. He could see the Queen's massive form clearly now, see the pain she was enduring. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. Because we believe that all intelligent life deserves a chance to survive. Because maybe, one day, when humans need help, you'll remember this moment and return the favor. And because I can't stand by and watch an entire civilization die when I might be able to prevent it. He turned to Ben. What do you need me to do? Ben looked at Lisa, then at Daniel. Are you absolutely sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Ben nodded slowly. All right. We'll need to extract cellular material from you and prepare it for introduction into the transformation matrix. The Queen's body is in a highly reactive state right now, which is actually good. It might accept the foreign biological material more easily. Over the next hour, Ben prepared the procedure while more Viridians crowded into the chamber. Word had spread through the palace that something unprecedented was happening. Scientists arrived with additional equipment. Medical experts examined Ben's findings and confirmed his analysis. There was heated debate in the clicking, scented language of the Viridians. Chancellor Kethrix argued that this was too dangerous, that allowing a human to interfere with the sacred metamorphosis was blasphemy. But other voices countered that the Queen was dying, that all options must be considered. Finally, the Queen herself spoke, her voice cutting through the argument. I will accept the humans' help. If I die trying to save my people, rather than doing nothing. Begin the procedure. Ben sterilized his instruments using Viridian medical equipment. He prepared a syringe to extract the necessary biological material from Daniel. Lisa stood close by, ready to help if needed. This is going to hurt, Ben warned. I need to take samples from your bone marrow. That's where the most active cell production occurs. I understand, Daniel said. He lay down on a medical platform that had been brought into the chamber. He focused on breathing slowly, staying calm. The extraction was painful. Daniel gritted his teeth as Ben worked, feeling the needle pierce deep into his hip bone. Sweat ran down his face. He could hear Lisa talking to him, saying encouraging words, but the pain made it hard to focus on her voice. Finally, it was done. Ben had collected several vials of material that glowed with a faint red color under the chamber's lights. He immediately began processing them, using Viridian technology to concentrate the enzymes and prepare them for introduction. "The next part is going to be tricky," Ben said, working quickly. "I need to inject this directly into the transformation matrix without damaging the membrane. If the cocoon ruptures, the queen will die immediately." "Let me help," said a Viridian scientist who had been watching intently. "I know the structure of the metamorphosis cocoon. I can guide you to the correct injection points." Ben and the Viridian worked together, preparing the injections. Daniel watched from his position on the medical platform, feeling weak from the extraction but determined to see this through. He could see the queen watching him through the translucent membrane, her compound eyes reflecting the lights. "Ready," Ben announced. He held a device that looked like a cross between a syringe and a Viridian tool. "Your Majesty, this may be uncomfortable." "I have been uncomfortable for 6 weeks," the queen replied. "Do what you must." Ben approached the cocoon carefully. The Viridian scientist indicated several points on the membrane's surface where it was thinnest. Ben inserted the injection device slowly, so slowly that Daniel could barely see it moving. The membrane stretched and then gave way. The device penetrated into the interior of the cocoon. Ben pressed the control, and the human biological material flowed into the transformation matrix. The cocoon's glow brightened immediately. The queen made a sound that might have been pain or surprise. Ben repeated the process at 4 more injection points, distributing the material throughout the cocoon. Each time, the glow intensified. The heartbeat sound that filled the chamber grew faster and stronger. When the last injection was complete, Ben stepped back. "Now we wait." The chamber was silent except for the pulsing rhythm from the cocoon. All eyes were fixed on the queen's form within. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Daniel tried to sit up, but found he was too weak. Lisa helped him lie back down. "Is it working?" someone asked in the Viridian language. "I don't know," Ben admitted. "Her vital signs are changing, but I can't tell if that's good or bad." Then the cocoon began to glow brighter. The membrane started to pulse in waves, and the color shifted from pale green to bright gold. The heartbeat sound became a drum, loud and strong. The queen's form within began to move, to shift, to change. Daniel watched with wonder as the transformation accelerated. He could see the queen's body reshaping itself, see her shells hardening and taking on new luster. The raw flesh disappeared beneath renewed armor. Her limbs straightened and strengthened. The light from the cocoon became so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. The sound reached a crescendo. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The light faded. The sound quieted. The chamber fell into darkness. For a long moment, nothing happened. Daniel heard Viridians moving in the darkness, heard worried voices. Then the emergency lights came on, casting the chamber in a pale blue glow. The cocoon was different. It was darker, harder, and completely opaque. No one could see inside anymore. "Did it work?" Lisa whispered. Before anyone could answer, the cocoon began to crack. The cracks spread across the surface of the cocoon like lightning. Everyone in the chamber held their breath. Daniel tried to stand, but his body wouldn't cooperate. Lisa kept a hand on his shoulder, watching the cocoon with wide eyes. A piece of the hardened membrane fell away. Then another. Light spilled out from inside, not the pale glow from before, but a brilliant radiance that filled the chamber. A manipulator emerged through the opening, then another. The queen was pulling herself free. She emerged slowly, and Daniel's breath caught. Queen Thesara had transformed completely. Her shell shone with deep purple and gold colors that seemed to shift and flow. She was even larger than before, her presence commanding and powerful. But it was her eyes that struck Daniel the most. They were bright and clear, filled with an energy that had been absent before. The queen stood to her full height, nearly 10 feet tall. She moved her limbs experimentally, testing her renewed body. All the Viridians in the chamber bowed low, their shells making a clicking sound as they touched the floor. Even Chancellor Kethrix bent in reverence. The Queen's gaze swept across the chamber and settled on Daniel, who was still lying on the medical platform, too weak to stand. She moved toward him with surprising grace. The crowd parted to let her pass. She stood over Daniel, looking down at the small human who had risked everything to save her. Then, slowly, she lowered herself until her massive head was level with his. "Daniel Hayes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You have done what I thought impossible. You have saved not just my life, but the future of my entire species." Daniel managed a weak smile. "I'm glad it worked." "How do you feel?" "I feel reborn. I feel as I have not felt in decades. The transformation is complete, and I can already sense the change spreading through my people. The genetic renewal is beginning." Ben approached cautiously, his scanner in hand. "Your Majesty, if you don't mind, I'd like to confirm that the enzyme integration was successful." The Queen allowed Ben to scan her. He stared at the readings with amazement. "It worked better than I hoped. The human enzyme didn't just catalyze your transformation. It's been incorporated into your genetic structure. You're producing it yourself now. And if what the ancient texts said is true, this renewal will spread to all Viridians." Over the next 3 days, Daniel recovered in the Royal Medical Facility. He received the best care the Viridian Empire could provide. Doctors monitored him constantly, making sure the extraction procedure hadn't caused permanent damage. Lisa and Ben visited him every few hours, bringing news from outside. The transformation's effects were spreading rapidly. Viridians across Hive Prime reported feeling stronger, healthier. Medical scans confirmed that the genetic degradation was reversing. Scientists were amazed to find that the enzyme Daniel had provided was being passed through the population via the quantum-entangled genetics that connected all Viridians to their queen. On the 4th day, Daniel was strong enough to walk. The Queen summoned him to the Great Hall. When he arrived, he found it filled with thousands of Viridians. News of what had happened had spread throughout the Empire. Ships were arriving from other star systems, bringing representatives who wanted to witness this historic moment. Daniel walked through the crowd, feeling very small among the towering aliens. He reached the throne platform, where Queen Thesara waited. She was magnificent in her renewed form, wearing elaborate ceremonial decorations. The Queen spoke, and her voice was amplified throughout the hall and broadcast to every world in the Viridian Empire. "People of the Viridian Empire, you know me as your queen. You know that I have ruled for 2 centuries, guiding our civilization to greatness. But I must now confess a truth that brings me shame. For the past 50 years, our species has been dying. The sacred metamorphosis that sustains us had failed, and I could not complete it. I kept this secret, too proud to admit weakness, too stubborn to ask for help." The crowd was completely silent. The revelation shocked them all. "We would have died," the Queen continued. "All of us, within a generation. Our proud empire would have faded into nothing. But we were saved by an act of courage from the most unexpected source." She gestured to Daniel. "This human, Daniel Hayes, discovered our secret. He ventured into the forbidden chamber, risking death, to offer his help. When I refused, he insisted. When I argued, he persisted. He gave his own biological material, not knowing if the procedure would kill him, because he believed that all intelligent life deserves a chance to survive." The Queen descended from her throne and approached Daniel. "He did what we could not do ourselves. He solved a problem that our greatest scientists had failed to answer, not because he was smarter, but because he was willing to try. Because he refused to accept that some problems are unsolvable." She placed one of her manipulators on Daniel's shoulder. "Daniel Hayes has shown us something we had forgotten. That asking for help is not weakness but wisdom. That working together achieves what pride and isolation cannot." That species, who seem primitive, may possess strengths we lack. The queen raised her voice, speaking to the assembled thousands. I hereby declare an eternal alliance between the Viridian Empire and humanity. From this day forward, humans are to be treated as equals, as partners, as friends. We will share our technology with them. We will share our knowledge. We will defend them as we would defend our own worlds. The hall erupted in sound. Viridians clicked and released pheromones of celebration. Daniel felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. In one act, humanity had gone from being barely noticed to being one of the most respected species in this part of the galaxy. But the Queen wasn't finished. Furthermore, the Forbidden Chamber will be renamed the Chamber of Unity. It will be open to visitors as a symbol of what can be achieved when species work together. A monument will be erected showing Daniel Hayes and myself, with words in both our languages. Courage knows no species. Compassion builds empires. Over the following weeks, the treaty was formalized. Viridian scientists began working with human researchers, sharing technologies that would advance humanity by centuries. Human diplomats established embassies on Viridian worlds. Trade agreements were signed. Educational exchanges were arranged. The genetic renewal continued to spread through the Viridian population. Birth rates began to rise. Immune systems strengthened. Scientists estimated that the species would be completely stable within 2 generations. Daniel became famous across human space. News of his actions spread to every human colony. When he returned to Earth, there were parades and celebrations. Politicians wanted to give him medals. Universities wanted to name buildings after him. But Daniel remained humble through it all. At a press conference on Earth, with cameras from hundreds of news agencies focused on him, a reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. Captain Hayes, you risked your life to save an alien species that had shown humanity little respect. Why did you do it? Daniel thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because I saw someone who needed help, and I helped. That's what humans do. That's who we are. We don't help people because we expect something in return. We help because it's right. Because we believe that all intelligent life has value. Because we understand that today, we might be the ones giving help, but tomorrow, we might be the ones who need it. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. The galaxy is a big place, and humanity is still very young. We have a lot to learn, but I hope we never lose this part of ourselves. I hope we never become so advanced or so proud that we stop caring about others. Because in the end, that compassion, that willingness to help even when it's hard or dangerous, that's what makes us human. The footage of that speech was watched billions of times across human space and was transmitted to allied species throughout the galaxy. It became a defining moment for humanity's role among the stars. 6 months later, Daniel returned to Hive Prime for the dedication of the monument. The Chamber of Unity had been opened to the public, and thousands of Viridians visited it every day. The monument stood in the palace gardens, a work of art that showed Daniel and Queen Thesara side by side, a human and a Viridian, united in purpose. Queen Thesara met him at the dedication ceremony. She had continued to thrive, and reports indicated that Viridian health was improving across all 12 star systems. How does it feel to be a hero? She asked him, as they stood before the monument. Honestly? Strange, Daniel admitted. I didn't do it to be a hero. I just did what needed to be done. That is what makes you one, the Queen said. True heroes do not seek glory. They simply act when action is needed. She turned to face him fully. Daniel Hayes, you taught my people a lesson worth more than all our technology. You taught us humility. You taught us the value of reaching out rather than standing alone. You taught us that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the smallest person in the room is actually the strongest. And you taught humanity something too, Daniel replied. You taught us that even ancient, powerful civilizations can face problems they can't solve alone. That everyone, no matter how advanced, sometimes needs help. And most importantly, you taught us that being willing to admit you need help is the first step toward solving any problem. The Queen nodded slowly. Perhaps we have both learned valuable lessons. They stood together, human and Viridian, as the dedication ceremony continued around them. Ships from dozens of species had come to witness this moment. The galaxy was watching as two civilizations, so different in almost every way, stood united by an act of pure compassion. Daniel looked up at the monument, at the words carved into its base in both languages. Courage knows no species. Compassion builds empires. He thought about how close the Viridians had come to extinction, how easily pride could have destroyed an entire civilization, but they had survived. They had been saved by a simple act of kindness from a species they had dismissed as primitive, and in saving them, humanity had proven that they deserved a place among the stars, not because of their weapons or their technology, but because of their hearts. As the ceremony ended and the crowds began to disperse, Daniel felt a sense of satisfaction deeper than any medal or recognition could provide. He had made a difference. He had saved lives. He had changed the course of history, and he had done it simply by being human.